What if I told you below this desk right now is a laptop with a 240 hertz screen, a Ryzen X3D processor, and a 4080? Well, MSI said, bet, we can do that for you. And this is it. It's actually very heavy. I think this thing weighs about 8 pounds, and that's not with the charger. So let's get right into this. Hello and welcome. My name is Wolfie. You're watching GreaterThanPie, and today we're taking a look at the MSI Raider A18. And well, let's just say there's a lot to be excited about here. Really high-end GPU, pretty damn fast processor, lots of little details that MSI has snuck in there. So I really want to game on this though and really compare it to my desktop, which is about the same price and about the same tier, but just desktop, and this is laptop. So I think it's gonna be a very interesting comparison. So instead of rambling too much, I'm just gonna open the box. Right here you can see the box. And this box is actually the third layer of box that this laptop came in. There was a shipping box, which got absolutely destroyed. A secondary box underneath it, which didn't fare very well. And then this one, which is the retail box, which this is what you're going to see if you were to buy this from like a Best Buy or any of those brick and mortar stores. And this looks like it came perfectly fine. So the triple boxing was actually a really good thing. Now, I did unfortunately open this upside down. Professional unboxer here, but it does kind of work in my favor. See, it's on purpose because on top are our accessories, in which we've got our charging brick. Now, our charging brick is quite heavy. This thing has 330 watts of solid power going through it. So you can't really get away with the smaller USB-C style chargers. And it actually has a very unique connector on the back. And it's actually pretty cool. It's actually multi-directional. So much like the USB-C ones, it doesn't matter which way you plug it in. Pretty cool. Then we got our standard, AC to DC connection cable so that it can connect it to the power supply and do its thing. We then have our warranty and quick start information, important stuff to have. And I'm actually glad that they did print that out just in case somebody who's less experienced is using this laptop. And then of course we have the laptop itself, and she's pretty heavy, first off, but it does look like despite all of the shipping damage to the boxes, it came out pretty good. I mean, with all this protection, I have a lot of confidence that we're not going to see a broken screen in here and that this is actually going to look perfect right out of the box. Once we remove the outer packaging here, not a scratch on it. The weight of this thing is no joke. It is just under 8 pounds, but luckily the IO is pretty stacked for those 8 pounds. So on the side here, we actually have two USB-C 3.2 Gen 2, one with power and the other one with not. You can see the one with power is actually marked here. You can charge through there, but it's probably not going to power the laptop very well. Both of these though do have DisplayPort out, so you can actually use them for screens. And then we also have a USB port right there, along with a headphone jack. And this right here is a USB 3.2 Gen 2. On the side, we have two USB 3.2 Gen 1s. And then on the back, we got a 2.5 gigabit LAN HDMI. And that is actually the power jack that looks like a USB port right there on the side. And then I did kind of gloss over it, but we do have a full-sized SD card reader slot right there. So when it comes down to the IO, this thing is packed. Now let's do the one-handed hinge test. I would expect nothing less from a device this big. Now that we're all set up, you can really see the RGB on this. We got a nice RGB emblem on the front, along with an RGB keyboard. It's a little bit hard to see under the studio lights, but it is adequately bright enough in darker environments. Now, one of the first things that actually stood out to me is how good this 240 hertz screen looks. So according to MSI, it is 100% of DCI P3 is the specification. And it looks good. It does look a little bit more saturated than I think an actually color calibrated monitor, but it does look really, really good. And the 16:10 aspect ratio that they have on this thing is just nice. It's got just that little bit of extra vertical height, so it makes working on things like documents and even playing games a little bit nicer. The resolution of the screen is 2560 by 1600, which would make it about as difficult to run as a normal 1440p screen. Now, we did do a bloat check, and it did come up with a little bit of bloat, specifically Norton. MSI, why do you push Norton? On my MSI motherboard, you push Norton. Why push Norton? It's not necessary. And it even slows down your systems. If I left that running, the performance would not be as good as it actually is on here. The touchpad feels pretty good. It is a multi-touch touchpad, and it's got a pretty noticeable click for both left and right click. The normal gestures do seem to work pretty well. And overall, I haven't had an issue with palm rejection because the keyboard and the actual like trackpad are so wide that my palms actually rest well outside of them. So I don't really have to deal with palm rejection all that much, which is pretty nice. Now, the webcam, it isn't great, but with the Windows Hello facial recognition, it does work really well with face tracking, which is an application that I can take advantage of. And of course, as a gaming laptop, one of the most important things is that keyboard, and well, I'm happy to say that it performs pretty well. It does feel, for lack of a better term, a little bit mushy, but it took me absolutely no time to acclimate into the keyboard, and I've been able to play more intense games, and I haven't had any issues with games that are input latency sensitive. Games like Muse Dash were perfectly playable, and although the keyboard is a little bit cramped, it's not any different than a condensed full-size keyboard, which I actually use in my day-to-day. So the sound on this is actually really good. And that's partially due to the fact that there are both 2 drivers and 2 subwoofers. It's a little extreme for a laptop. Okay, now all that is just nice to have. Essentially, the things around the hardware are good, but how does the actual hardware perform? Well, you see, they perform pretty well. And part of that is probably due to the fact that MSI is actually allowing a pretty impressive amount of cooling and power to come to these components. MSI has a 5 heat pipe, 2 fan cooler that is underneath here. And the heatsink and cooling is pretty chunky. This whole bottom here is ventilated, and that's just for the fan intakes. Up here is more ventilation up at the top for, again, more intakes. And then all of that is getting blasted out the sides and the back of this laptop. Though it does sound pretty intense while it's gaming.
El 80% de los accidentes aéreos provocan la muerte. Respete el límite de velocidad.
So you've heard this beast roar, and you're probably wondering, what is even being cooled under here? Well, we are cooling an RTX 4080 and a Ryzen 9 7945H X3D. Those are very, very powerful chips, and they do like suck back a lot of power, and they need a lot of cooling. The cooling on this thing is great, despite being loud, and the power delivery is actually fascinating because we have 330 watts of power budget that can be split between the CPU and GPU, and the laptop knows how to switch between them to better suit the workload. And to better supplement these chips, we do have 32 gigabytes of RAM and a 1 terabyte SSD. So everything in here is blazing fast, but when you can use up to 250 watts, I mean, this GPU and CPU shouldn't be restricted by wattage or really cooling, more just the constraints of, well, the cut down laptop versions of these components. So let's talk benchmarks. 3D Mark saw a score of 4,572. Now, compared to the desktop variant of the 4080, which actually it's more of a 4080 Super, so it's really not apples to apples, but it is pretty close. That is about 61% of the performance of the 4080 Super. Steel Nomad was 3,956, which is about 60% of what the desktop got, which was 6,560. Port Royal is entirely a ray tracing based benchmark, and we got an 11,180, which again is 60% of what the desktop was able to get at 18,353. Time Spy was a 16,917, which was actually a slightly better showing for the laptop at 68% of the desktop score of 24,258. Now, the fact that this laptop is capable of coming within 40% of a full-size desktop GPU is already very impressive. And it's able to do so quite stably, albeit just a little loud. And in actual games, it's still a really impressive device. I did not think I could run some of the settings that I ran, but they were the suggested ones. So let's talk about Cyberpunk 2077, which ran at 0.77 frames per second at ultra ray tracing. Reasonably, I would just lower that setting a little bit and I'd be able to probably hit close to 120 to, 150 frames per second. But if you really wanted the absolute perfect eye candy on a display this size, you can do it. And Doom Eternal is a little bit old. We're about to get a replacement for it, but that runs at Ultra Nightmare. No DLSS with ray tracing at 165 frames per second. Forza Horizon 5 is another game that actually just got ported to the PS5, I think. So it's somewhat relevant, okay? And that was 123 frames per second at the extreme preset. Now, honestly, all of those are very, very playable frame rates at settings that I personally think are a little extreme for this device. The screen is, while 18 inches diagonally, it doesn't need that much. You can definitely turn down some of that eye candy and get a very, very good experience out of this. In fact, the thing that I've been playing the most on it are the Hoyoverse games and Infinity Nikki, which look stunning on here and run at, well, in the case of Genshin Honkai, they run at 60 frames per second, but ZZZ and Infinity Nikki have uncapped frame rates and they run much closer to 160 frames per second. So overall, it performs. It performs well and it looks good while doing it. And the surprises don't end here because VR is very doable. Now, I tested using my HTC Vive Vision Pro, which is slightly harder to run than a Valve Index and about as difficult to run as a big screen Beyond, but definitely harder to run than a Meta Quest 3S. And yeah, it was actually able to do so. There were a little bit of hiccups that were coming from just load issues that I was able to reduce by just simply not oversampling. But I got into VR chat, I was able to move around just fine, load my avatar completely without issue, and it just worked. I was also able to play Beat Saber without any problems. And thanks to that DisplayPort over USB-C, I love this port because it made my headset a one cable solution, which makes it easier. It just makes it so much easier to play VR games. So for a mobile VR station for me, this thing is kind of awesome. Actually, it is awesome. Okay, I'm just gonna stop myself here for a second because there is one thing that I didn't touch on, and that's why would I get a laptop like this? The 5000 series is on its way. AMD has new CPUs coming out. Why this one? And there's actually a really good reason, and it's going to be price. You see, laptops move very, very quickly and the prices on them drop rapidly. And this laptop right here has a lot of solid performance. And if the rumors are true that I have been hearing, let's just say the 5000 series GPUs aren't going to make all that big of a difference. You're actually better off buying a 4000 series laptop with the cheaper GPU, and you'll get, I think it's up to like 98% of the performance, unless you go with the 5090, which even then it's going to be more wattage restriction than anything else. So like performance wise between the 50, the 40 series, they're almost identical. And if you're an AI developer, maybe that's the one area that you'd want to wait. The CPU, on the other hand, that's going to be an interesting case. Now, we do know that the X3D variants of AMD CPUs, they do outlast their normal CPUs. And we aren't getting their X3D variants for laptops just yet. We've got their AI series, and then they are going to be getting their H series. And I don't think we've heard anything about another X3D coming out yet. So the CPU and the GPU in here are probably fine for the next year, 2 years, and possibly even up to 4 years, depending on how things go. And I have a sinking suspicion because of how the current information from NVIDIA's 5000 series is going, that we're probably going to be good for the next 4 years on graphics, which is insane to me. I don't think I've ever heard of a laptop generation with no improvement, but more expensive. But it looks like we are about to be in that situation. So before they go away, it might be a good idea to look into something like this laptop. But how upgradable is it? Let's open it up and find out. So let's get into this laptop. Now, I will say this is a rather easy endeavor for a couple different reasons. One, all of the screws are exactly the same length. 2, they're all Phillips. And 3, a standard iFixit kit will contain a screwdriver that has the right bit to actually make it so that you can get in here. There are some plastic clips on the inside that you're going to need to release, which I used the guitar pick looking thing to crack this open. But realistically, any soft plastic piece can be used to get into this laptop pretty easily. Now that we got the back off, we can really get a good look at this underneath the hood. You'll see we've got our massive cooling for our CPU and GPU at the top. There's a heat spreader just underneath that, and I think that that is actually where our RAM is being stored. And I do believe it's soldered because it's underneath there. But you'll also notice just to the left of that, we have upgradable SSD storage. Yeah, which that's pretty nice. I'm going to go ahead and throw in an extra 2 terabyte drive into there because more space is better. We also have a fully replaceable Wi-Fi module, although we won't really need to do that for a couple of years because this is Wi-Fi 7. Down below that, we've got our battery and then 2 subwoofers for the sound system. This thing's kind of crazy back here, and it wasn't even that hard to get into, which is pretty awesome. So it gets a thumbs up in my book for how easy it is to actually service and, well, get into this laptop. So overall, I really do love this thing, and it's gonna probably last a very long time and, well, have its uses even on this channel. And I will definitely be gaming on it when I don't want to game on my desktop. It's nice to just have a device that I can pop open and get going pretty quickly with. So overall, I really do like it, and I'm definitely going to find a way to work it into the GreaterThanPie workflow. But that is where I'm going to end the video today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Wolfie, out.